Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
But now let's take a look at some of the front pages in the UK. We've got Steve Richards there standing by in Westminster. And what have you got, Steve?
Well, I think there are three big stories, two to do with domestic politics, which you can guess, the new government and the crisis in the Labour Party. But above all, today, Dermot, here, as you could imagine, is that what the Sunday Times calls the massacre in Munich continues to dominate nearly all the front pages. The Sunday Times, sort of typical of the Sunday papers. There's a lot of analysis about what the Sunday Times calls the teenage loner who killed the 9 people in Munich. And there's a very, I think, potent quote from Angela Merkel, who said that the attack had left Germans wondering, where is safe? And that, I think, is the sort of impact of these stories, these terrorist, well, actually, this isn't a terrorist attack, but it becomes conflated, I think, with some of the terrible things that have happened in Paris and elsewhere, but this is different. Like the Nice one, what do you do when you have a loner influenced by other loners who've committed atrocities through social media and other things? There's not much you can do about it. And there's a lot of analysis about him, failed exams and all the rest of it. But in the end, it's very hard for the papers to make much sense of.
And Steve, from the Sunday Telegraph, I believe you got Theresa May in a honeymoon period, of course, but a lot of issues, to say the least, to deal with.
It's interesting who they're putting up at weekends to do interviews. Last weekend, I know you were lucky, you got David Davis, the Brexit Secretary of State, but they didn't want Europe to be the focus. They put out Justine Greening and others last weekend, the new Education Secretary. This weekend, it's Patrick McLaughlin, the new chairman of the party, who's given an interview to the Sunday Telegraph. And the headline is Tory appeal to the working class. Patrick McLaughlin himself, from a sort of working class background, saying that the Conservative Party might have been seen as a nasty party once, but and they might have seemed uninterested at times in what he calls working families, but he wants MPs to praise teachers, nurses and other public sector workers more often. So you can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to put a focus on the agenda beyond Brexit. It reminds me a bit of when John Major became Prime Minister in 1990 after Margaret Thatcher, a traumatic period. And he talked about a classless society. He emphasised his working class background and all the rest of it. But Europe hovered for John Major and in the end made his life hellish. And they are also emphasising a new style, a new approach, targeting working families, as he calls it in that interviews. But Europe, of course, hovers in the form of Brexit and a small overall majority. There's quite a lot of talk about that in the commentaries this week, that the honeymoon takes place, but the majority in that House of Commons of 12 will make it very, very tough in the months to come.
And Steve, quick reflection on this Seema Malhotra story. How's that playing?
Well, it's running in the bulletins. She, of course, who was in the shadow cabinet until quite recently, she was one of the many who resigned, has said it's on the front page of The Observer, and other papers have picked it up very extensively. She's written to John Bercow, the Speaker, saying that one of Jeremy Corbyn's aides made an unauthorised entry into her office, and this is part of the sort of sinister atmosphere in which they're all functioning at the moment. I think this is interesting. Whether this will run for very long, who knows? I doubt it. But I think day by day we're getting story after story from these former shadow cabinet people suggesting that one way or another Jeremy Corbyn is not up to it. And I think this is going to be the nature of this leadership contest. I don't think it's going to be a titanic battle of ideas from the early stages, but the dissenters, the rebels, are just going to constantly try and convey to this electorate, fairly or unfairly, that they do not think this operation around Corbyn is up to it. And more than that, they think in some ways it's sinister. And I think we're going to get one story after another in the newspapers. This is the one that's making the news here today.